Welcome to The Source, where we combine the headlines with in-depth conversations with the newsmakers themselves. Today on the program, lawmakers are set to vote on whether or not to impeach Chief Justice Maria Lourdes Sereno.
I think there is more than enough. Yung grounds, no? Nandyan.
And now a petition questioning her appointment is filed at the Supreme Court.
She is unlawfully holding the position of the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court.
But the palace insists it has nothing to do with moves to oust the Chief Justice.
We have no preference either way. We will enforce whatever decision the Supreme Court or the Senate may have as sitting as an impeachment court.
Also, should Filipinos give the joint exploration with China a chance?
You will allow foreign companies to conduct mining in national territory. I don't think there's any reason for it not to be applicable in an area where there is only sovereign rights.
Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque joins us live. And later, a cashless city? Well, this could happen soon in the Philippines. That's for today's In Focus. Thank you for joining us. I'm Pinky Webb. Lawmakers will vote to determine if there is probable cause to impeach Chief Justice Maria Lourdes Sereno this week. Aside from the impeachment proceedings, there's another effort to remove the Chief Magistrate from office. The Solicitor General yesterday filed a quo warranto petition before the Supreme Court seeking to nullify her appointment as Chief Justice. But Malacañang says it has no preference on the process by which the Chief Justice should be removed from office. Let's go straight to the source of the story. We have Presidential Spokesperson Harry Roque. Secretary, thank you again for being here. Good to see you again.
It's always a pleasure, Pinky.
Okay, so yesterday the Solgen filed a quo warranto petition before the Supreme Court. Sec, was this necessary?
Well, you know, you can't dictate on the Solicitor General, no? He is, after all, the chief lawyer of the Republic, no? But I would say that perhaps, no, he wants to test jurisprudence. We know what the established doctrine is, that impeachable officers can only be removed through impeachment. But I think in this instance, he really wants to provoke jurisprudence, because if there's requirements that were unmet at the time of her appointment, he wants to send a message that, you know, the rules should apply to all, and that if he did not comply, you must suffer the consequence, and that is removal from office.
But isn't it the fault of the JBC? This is something I spoke to Attorney Jojo Lacanilao yesterday, because again, let's go back to this. The JBC is the one that filters those that could possibly be members of the judiciary. Pinasa nila si Chief Justice Maria Lourdes Sereno. Why is that going to be the fault now of the Chief Justice?
Well, I think it's because the JBC itself made the requirement. And the problem is, well, now the JBC, the Chief Justice is the ex-officio chair of the JBC. At that time, she wasn't. But the legal issue now is whether or not non-compliance with the requirements of a constitutional body will render the appointment null and void to begin with. Now, remember, impeachment can be a remedy if the appointment was valid in the first place. But now that we find out that it was invalid, not because of non-compliance with mandatory requirements, that's the issue that will be submitted to the court.
As a lawyer, though, was this necessary?
Well,
as a lawyer, not as a spokesperson.
That's the problem.
Pwede ba yun?
Hindi nga po pwede. So I have to be consistent with the palace position that we leave it to the Supreme Court now to resolve the issue of the quo warranto petition. And of course, we leave it to Congress to resolve the pending impeachment complaint.
Does this send, though, the wrong signal, you think, to the House of Representatives or the Senate?
I don't think so. I think it sends the right signal to the public that when you aspire for public office, don't take any shortcuts, comply with the requirements, because if not, you could be deprived of the appointment itself.
But you're a lawyer. You're supposed to follow the Constitution, and the Constitution says she can only be impeached.
Well, there's, of course, there's a mention that the Chief Justice is an impeachable officer, but again, the issue is, if the appointment was invalid from the very beginning in the first place, then she can be removed by quo warranto, and that's the interesting issue that the Supreme Court now has to resolve.
But that's not in the Constitution.
Well, the Constitution says that the court is the final arbiter of all legal disputes, no? So it's the court exercising also its constitutional function if it were to rule on the quo warranto petition.
Well, here's the thing, Secretary, you know, you have Senate President Pimentel, he didn't seem too happy with this move by the Solgen filing this quo warranto petition. Let's listen to Senate President Pimentel's take on the quo warranto petition.
Justify ng maayos kasi nga pagbasa nga natin sa constitutional provision, ang message that we get is that the only way to remove these high-ranking government officials who are so-called impeachable officials is through impeachment. Diba? So, if all of a sudden there is another way to remove them, where is that found? Yan ang tanong.
That's an ally of the president, sir.
Yes. Well, I'm not a spokesperson of the
It's like you want to say something more, but you can't.
Well, I'm not the spokesperson of the Solgen. All that I'm saying is it's now in the Supreme Court. No, it's now within the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court to clarify whether or not you can file a quo warranto proceeding against a sitting impeachable officer. So we will learn from this decision, whatever it may be.
As you said, let's test this on jurisprudence.
Yes, after all, one of the functions of the judiciary is to provide guidance as well to bench and bar. No?
But doesn't this tread on dangerous ground, sir? For example, this is an impeachable officer, the CJ, and of course members of constitutional bodies and members of the judiciary and the president and the vice president. Would this not set a dangerous precedent?
Well, in the first place, we're assuming it will be allowed.
Yeah.
That's why you're talking of having a president already, no? But it hasn't been allowed by the Supreme Court, so I think it's premature, no?
Yeah.
Correct, no? And I think the court will discuss it this afternoon in its in-bank session. Yeah. So we will have to wait. That's all that the palace is saying, no? In our constitution, we have, equality between co-equal branches of government. This is an issue that only the Supreme Court can resolve now because it has been submitted to it.
Okay, because I think that was also a statement made by the minority Senator Antonio Trillanes. Let's listen to that as well, the reaction on this quo warranto petition.
Yang quo warranto proceedings na yan, bawal yan. Kaya ako, pag inaksyonan yan ng Korte Suprema, ay sila ay in-expose nila yung sarili nila ng sariling impeachment dahil pwedeng gawing basis yan because it is unconstitutional.
I guess that's the operative word there, expose. It's as if you expose the other officers to this as well.
Ang problema lang dun sa opinion ni Senator Trillanes, hindi naman niya jurisdiction na magsabi kung anong sinasabi talaga ng saligang batas. Yan po'y katungkulan ng hudikatura. Kaya nga sa akin, hold your horses, no? Wala pa naman desisyon. So hayaan natin na magdesisyon ng Korte Suprema para alam na natin talaga kung pwedeng i-co-warranto mga impeachable officers.
At least this could serve, well, as you said, jurisprudence. Let's see what happens. Pero meron daw pass dito. May precedent dito on Justice Fernand, sir?
Well, hindi kasi siya directly applicable. Dalawa na yan. Ito yung dahilan kung bakit na-disbar si dating Ombudsman Gonzales, no? Dahil nais niyang imbestigahan yung mga nakaupo mga Supreme Court Justices, no? At sabi nga ng Korte Suprema, hindi po pwede mong gawin yan at na-disbar pa ka siya dahil dyan. Tapos si Chief Justice Fernand, ganoon din, pinapadisbar. So dinismiss yan kasi kung madidisbar sila dahil qualification ng maging lawyer, no? Di hindi na sila po pwede maging Chief Justice. At sabi, that is circumventing the prohibition. But at the same time, the Solgen naman cites other compelling cases na sinasabi na what is at issue here is kung valid ba yung appointment to begin with.
Yeah.
So the rule that an impeachable officer can be removed only through impeachment is if the appointment is valid to begin with. No? Pero for instance nga, kung siya pala ay hindi natural born person, kahit kailan pwede yung paalisin, not only through impeachment. No? So nandun tayo ngayon. It's an interesting legal question.
It is
Wala
interesting.
Pa.
Is it very interesting for you
very
as
interesting
well
as a lawyer and as a former academic kasi wala pang ganitong instance na talagang impeachable officers sought to be removed through quo warranto. No?
Pala, sometimes nakakalimutan ko, you were a law professor as
For
well.
15 years.
So yeah, this will serve as a basis on future possible. Pero tama, no, Secretary, first we need to find out tatanggapin ba to ng Supreme Court?
At ano magiging desisyon ng Korte Suprema, no? So, merong tama, meron diyang mali. Kasi kung tama si Solgen, di magbibigyan ng due course yan at baka madesisyonan pa. Pero kung tama yung kampo ni Chief Justice Sereno, di madidismiss ang petisyon. Pero, siyempre, ang problema ng Chief Justice, hindi lang naman yung nakabinbin laban sa kanya. No? She has to reckon with the fact that she also has the impeachment complaint to reckon with.
Right, and that vote is going to be on Thursday. Just before we leave this topic, kung mali ho ba si Solgen Calida, aaminin mo ho ba sa amin na mali siya?
Well, ang korte po magsasabi. So, wala nang aminan yan kasi the court will really say there's a justiciable controversy that has to be resolved and the court will have to say either way who is right or wrong.
Okay, let's talk about very briefly joint exploration. I know that you've been talking about this over and over again. First, nasa na ho tayo in terms of progress on the joint exploration? Because we're looking at two areas, hindi ho ba, sir?
Wala naman eh. Parehong suspendido. So this is a purely academic discussion. No? Meanwhile, some companies are raking it in the stock market because of the speculation that they will be allowed to engage in joint exploration. But I have verified the status, and according to Energy Secretary Cusi yesterday in our cabinet meeting, we're very far from an agreement that would facilitate joint venture. No? And I
Wait,
guess,
but you used suspended. You said suspended.
because there is
where are the talks right now? Are they suspended?
No, what happened was for 57 and 72, we imposed a moratorium on exploration. No? So there's no exploration ongoing right now. Now, sabi nga ni Secretary Cusi yesterday, I'd like at least to lift the moratorium so we can resume exploration activities in 57 and 72. Ako naman, I had lunch with the Chinese ambassador and sabi nila, we hope the Philippines will not do that. No, because right now the status quo is serving us very well. We want bilateral talks ahead of any unilateral action on the part of the Philippines. No, so I don't know where we are. So to those speculating in the stock market, well, speculate on because there's no certainty on whether or not there will be joint exploration.
Oh,
no?
but now I'm more confused because the president is saying co-ownership. You had earlier said that, no, sorry, it was Secretary Alan Peter Cayetano who earlier said that we are aggressively pursuing talks for joint exploration. So now you're saying that it's suspended?
No, what was suspended
Was the
is the actual exploration activities. We declared a moratorium on all exploration activities.
Stop the
Talks are ongoing, but we're very far away from arriving at an agreement. I'll tell you why. No, on the part of the Philippines, there's political noise. There's political noise purportedly that it is not allowed. On the part of the Chinese, there's also political noise because they also believe that portions of where they're exploring belongs to them, no, despite the arbitral decision. And they're not used to a state company having to share an activity with any other entity. They're used to doing it on their own. No?
Kanila lang.
And they're also not used to dealing with constitutional requirements, no, requiring that they retain minority stake. So it's not as if it will happen tomorrow because as far as both sides are concerned, there are serious considerations to take care of. And in the Philippines, certainly it's the political noise that's the problem.
We'll be taking a short break. This is The Source on CNN Philippines. When we return, we'll talk more about joint exploration with China with presidential spokesperson Harry Roque Jr. And later, find out which city in the Philippines is targeting fully integrated cashless system. That's for today's In Focus.
Coffee Mate is now also liquid. Level up, the new liquid Coffee Mate that blends smoothly for your creamy coffee. You will love it. Available in 4 flavors.
Dahil Chinese gunboats told them to stop.
This
Ang
is the
57
readback.
naman, walang controversy yan, no, that it's really ours. Pero
Yes.
wala naman silang capability to undertake it themselves. They really need a foreign investor,
Yeah,
no?
the PNOC.
Why there's
All right, you're watching The Source on CNN Philippines. Our guest today, presidential spokesperson Harry Roque. Sir, so you were talking about it. Just very briefly, there are 2. Service Contracts 57, which is in Calamian, northwest of.
Wala pong yung controversy kasi
pag-usapan muna
hindi yan
natin.
kasama sa West Philippine Sea. Now, ang problema po talaga in all extractive industries, and there's a new branch of international law that came out because of it, is that you may have the mineral resource, but developing countries don't simply have the technology and the capital. That's why foreign companies are allowed to come in, and that's why Labugal says, come on, let's not construe the constitution in a myopic manner that would result in strangulation of the economy. No, that's a decision in Labugal. But outside of the Philippines, that's the story of all oil-producing countries.
You were saying that
there was,
yesterday.
in the beginning, because they were colonized, it's the colonizing country that developed the mining industry, the oil industry, and at some point, then they became independent. They said, well, we have sovereignty over the mineral deposits, we're taking over. And that's when the oil companies decided to have a mechanism by which they could resort to arbitration to settle the disputes. And the rule now is there shall be no taking of foreign investments without, number one, payment of just compensation, payment of just, adequate, and prompt compensation. So that's the rule now. Hindi lang po Pilipinas ang nagkaroon ng problema dyan. Ayaw talaga ng mga bansa na naging recently newly declared independent states that their colonial powers will monopolize the most lucrative industry.
Okay,
And that's why you now have International Center for the Settlement of Investment Disputes. You now have arbitral clauses saying that international laws are governed because we want a level playing field between those who have resources and those who want to exploit them.
Okay, so we may have the resources, maybe we don't have the technology. Fine.
And capital.
Okay, and capital. But gusto ko lang balikan si Service Contract 57. Hindi ba ito yung sa PNOC, the Mitra Energy and the China National Offshore Oil Company, sir?
Well, ito po, hindi ito joint exploration. Talagang foreign ano lang siya, foreign company engaged in exploration in the Philippines. No similar from British Petroleum starting the oil industry
So
in
this is
Saudi
not
Arabia.
co-ownership whatsoever.
It's not co-ownership.
Okay.
Talagang siya ay foreign contractor.
Ang problema po natin, the bone of contention is probably the Service Contract 72, which is the Recto Bank.
That's the Recto Bank. Akala ko nga noon, hindi rin yan disputed. Kasi napakalapit yan sa atin. But it turns out, when you look at the 9 dash lines, pasok siya. Now, let me reiterate. Totoo po, may desisyon na ang arbitral tribunal. At kaya nga po sinasabi ko, wala nang hadlang para tayo makipagkaibigan na sa China. Bakit? Kahit ano pang gawin nila, kahit sila pang pinakamalakas na kapangyarihan sa buong mundo, they cannot erase the fact that there is now a declaration under international law saying that there is no basis for the 9 dash lines. So magawa-ngawa sila dyan, they may be the mightiest country on earth, they can't erase that there's no basis for the 9 dash lines.
But before you continue, I understand that, sir. It's good to hear that from you. But are they conceding? That it's not there.
Yeah, but you see, in international law, they don't need to concede. International
Why?
law is law whether or not countries recognize it
Or
as
not.
law.
Okay.
That's the nature of international law. Hindi mo mapipilit ang ayaw tanggapin. Pero sa mata ng buong daigdig, tanggap yun.
Walang 9 dash
Yun ang
line.
hindi namin pinagkakaintindihan ng mga kritiko. Kahit anong gawin ng China, hindi niya mabubura yung katotohanan na walang basihan yung kanyang 9 dash lines. And the artificial islands, according to the ruling, of course, belongs to the Philippines because it's within our EEZ. Ang problema, ito namang 72, hindi naman naapektuhan yung mga artificial islands. So hindi ko maintindihan kung bakit Justice Carpio, for instance, will cite the decision on the 3 artificial islands on 72 when the 3 artificial islands don't have anything to do with 72. What is clear is it's part of our EEZ, but there is still a dispute under international law because a dispute under international law is defined as a disagreement on a fact or law involving an issue of international law.
I'm really talking to a professor here. All right. So it's ours, but I guess the problem is, siguro needs to be discussed, sir, is what the president said about co-ownership.
Well, alam mo,
Ano ho ba
hindi
yung
naman niya sinabi na
co-ownership?
blanco ownership. It is like, that makes a whole world of a difference. It is like,
So
it
what
is
like a
Well,
co-ownership?
what does it entail to have joint exploration? You have contribution either in capital or manpower, and then you share in the yield. Meanwhile, it's actually no different from oil that is found on land. Kasi when you're on land and there are national boundaries, wala namang kinikilalang national boundary yung oil because it's liquid. So countries opt to utilize them on a joint basis. So it's akin to co-ownership, but it doesn't affect national territories. So ganun din ang sinasabi ng panguko natin.
sir,
He said it is like co-ownership. He didn't actually say it is co-ownership.
Like,
Yes.
okay. But because you said that, I want to bring this in, that in the 1987 Constitution, it says that the state shall protect the nation's marine wealth in its EEZ and reserve its use and enjoyment exclusively to Filipino citizens.
Well, alam mo, yan nga yung pinag-uusapan sa Labugal. It's even worse kasi Labugal has to do with mining in land territory subject to full sovereignty. And nakasulat dyan that mining or extractive industry is exclusively for Filipino corporations. So ang issue, can foreigners participate even if they're not a Filipino corporation? And the Supreme Court said yes. Now, itong sinasabi ko, If in a land territory subject to full sovereignty, you can have foreign investors participate in extraction and exploitation, how much more in EEZ? Kasi in EEZ, walang sovereignty dyan,
Yeah,
only
but
sovereign rights.
Isn't the decision on land territory, sir?
No, but what I'm saying is, land territory kasi involves full sovereignty. In EEZ, there is no full sovereignty, only sovereign rights. So the standard of enforcing, o kumbaga, yung exclusivity, is not on the basis of sovereignty. It's just on sovereign rights. Ito yan eh, mas mataas ang sovereignty.
Of course, yes,
all
it's
laws
sovereign
applicable,
rights.
all jurisdiction. Sovereign rights, limited lang.
Okay.
Exploration, exploitation lang.
Mahaba-haba pang discussion to, sir. All right. Very quickly, though, there's still a lot of topics to discuss. We've finally accepted aid from the EU, sir.
Because it was not subject to any conditionalities, and it was specifically intended to aid the Philippines and the President in his pet undertaking, the war against drugs.
So, lahat ho ba yun? How much is it? And is it in full mapupunta sa drug
It's
rehabilitation?
240 million plus, no? And it will all go to drug rehabilitation efforts, no? So, we thank the EU for that because hindi naman sinasabi ng Presidente we're rejecting all aid. When it's actually pursuant to avowed goals of the state, such as successfully winning the war on drugs, of course it will be welcome. And more importantly, not subject to conditionalities.
So, is there better relationship now between the Philippines and the EU?
I believe so. Kasi dati wala tayong naririnig sa EU kung hindi paglabag sa karapatan ng mga tao itong
Human
gera
rights
ng laban sa droga. But now that they have donated to the same war on drugs, who are they now to say that there's absolutely no benefit derived from the war against drugs?
But just because they support or they give financial aid on the war on drugs, does that necessarily mean that there is no human rights abuses in the country?
Well, if they believe that there are gross human rights violations, they should not give even a single euro towards that purpose.
No gross human rights violations. All right. Is there any more in the offing, sir, from the EU? Any more aid in the future?
That really depends on them because we've not asked for any aid.
Okay. Boracay. The issue on Boracay, sir, the 6 months, is this something you can clarify, sir?
You know, let me declare, and this is something that I have to declare. I've been counsel to Boracay Foundation. And Boracay Foundation, of course, is an NGO that, was established to protect the environment in Boracay because most of its members are resort owners. And the resort owners know that their business is only as good as Boracay, no? If Boracay is destroyed, then all their business interests go away. Now, what they're worried about, although this is not a presidential line, is an unscientific closure of Boracay without knowing what they will be doing to rehabilitate Boracay. Remember, as resort owners, they would want to see Boracay cleaned and rehabilitated because, as I said, all the investments will go under and if it's destroyed. No? So I guess I have to walk a fine line now. Of course, I'm not practicing, but I've been in Boracay since 1988. I'm part of Boracay. I consider myself a resident of Boracay. I know there are violations. We've filed a writ of kalikasan against against the reclamation of Katiklan. We are at the forefront of the fight against West Cove. Everyone that violates, we sue them, at least in the past when I was their counsel. No? But right now, I guess what they're saying is we value Boracay like no other entities do because it's our livelihood, but we don't see how a closure, an immediate closure, will result in the rehabilitation of Boracay. They want eventually some kind of major rehabilitation, but they want also scientific studies conducted because that's what we did when we filed suit on the reclamation of Katiklan. So, we actually hired the UP Institute of Marine Science to do a study, and they want to do the same thing before government resorts to closure.
Okay.
Now that was really as a private person and as a person who grew up in Boracay literally, no. But the president's order is clear, and he reiterated. The government stand is he reiterated. I have to agree there's a difference in interpretation between what I thought I heard from the President and Secretary Anyo, and this was apparent in yesterday's cabinet meeting. What I thought the President said was 6 months for the DNR Secretary to submit his recommendations on what to do with Boracay. Now, yes, last night, he reiterated again, we're in the process of conducting factual and legal investigation. Now, Secretary Anyo, though, interpreted the mandate of the president as within 6 months, do everything that you can.
Tapusin mo in 6 months.
To preserve Boracay, no? So this is something that needs to be clarified. But I taped the president, and I intend to sit down with Secretary Año. Oh, remember, this is what he said, no? And I'm also getting the transcript, not just the transcript, but the tape of the instructions of the president in the last cabinet meeting, because I noticed in the minutes it did say that 6 months to close all violating establishments. But there was no mention of to close Boracay itself. No, I guess that's what.
So you need to clarify this.
We need to clarify this, and that's why I will review the tapes and I will sit down with.
So hindi pa tayo sigurado on what was said and what was meant.
I have made a declaration yesterday in the press briefing on the basis of my notes, and on my memory that the president really talked about a 6-month period for the DNR secretary to submit his recommendations. But as I said in the bathroom yesterday, Secretary Año told me 6 months to do everything that can be done to rehabilitate Boracay.
So there's something maybe lost in translation here. So that's something you need to clarify. Because a lot of, syempre, the tourists, the owners, di ba, they're affected by this because they're thinking, ano ba talaga?
Yeah, there's a colleague from UP. In fact, they're going to have a world conference in Shangri-La in Boracay in July, and they want to know if the world conference will push through because Boracay might be closed in July.
Yun na, pasok dun sa 6 months. Rappler, sir, any update on this? Omidyar already donated the 1.4.
Well, I've said it. If they didn't think they were in violation of the Constitution, they would not have donated. They would have fought for the legal position
but they're
that there
still
was
fighting
nothing.
it. They still have a petition.
Yeah, but they will
the
now
courts.
move to dismiss because they will argue that it has been mooted since the money has been donated and effectively the Philippine Depository Receipt has ended. No? So that, to my mind, is an admission.
All right. Secretary, what about the speakership? Is there some rumblings going on there?
The speaker is our most loyal and trusted ally in the House of the Representatives. I've lost touch because it's been 5 months. You know how time flies. It's been 5 months since I left Congress, but I think I have enough friends there, and I don't think there's any viable alternative to Speaker Pantaleon Alvarez. Although I do hear, here and there that there's some congressmen who in the past were quiet are now speaking against the speaker. But all this will come to naught because ultimately the president will reiterate his support for Speaker Pantaleon Alvarez.
Speaker Alvarez still has the full support of the president.
He does. He does.
So any talk or talks on his possible removal is impossible?
Well, any such talks is wishful thinking on whoever wants to replace the speaker.
Presidential spokesperson, Sir Harry Roque, always a pleasure. Maraming salamat for your time, sir. I know you're so busy now.
I always enjoy coming to your show. Thank you very much.
Sir. And thank you for watching. You're watching The Source on CNN Philippines. Rather, we're still going to come back. A fully integrated cashless system in the Philippines. Find out which city targets that on today's In Focus. Time now for today's In Focus here on The Source. If you're using the MRT and LRT, are you still using it? You did it once.
Well, I've not been using it as often as I did when I was in UP, but I do, and this time on an anonymous basis.
You're probably familiar with a beep card, but did you know that if fully integrated, the same card can also be used for other services? That's what Cebu City is trying to do now. In this now viral Facebook post, Mayor Tomas Osmeña shares how he plans to make Cebu City the first to have a fully integrated cashless payment system in the country using Korean technology. Cebu City will not only be able to use a smart card to pay for bus and taxi fares, residents will also be able to use use the same card in gas stations, convenience stores, supermarkets, restaurants, and even cinemas. Osmeña adds the smart card is faster to use than a credit card and is more secure since it carries no personal information other than your name. They're also looking at the possibility of using your smartphone as substitute for the smart card. If this pushes through, Cebu City will be at par with smart cities like Hong Kong, Japan, and Korea. Thank you for joining us here on The Source. I'm Pinky Webb. You're watching CNN Philippines.